Welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
Hi, Count. Good afternoon. Yeah, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. It was a very disappointing day yesterday, the memories of 92 coming back, of South Africa needing 22 or 23 runs of just one ball after they came back from the rain break. At least the DLS, uh, the uh, the formula has gotten better over the years, I must say.
Hmm. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah, but what was disappointing was that if the revised score at the for 5 overs would be what 44 or 45,
48 it was, I guess. Yeah.
48,
Hmm.
and South Africa already had that score, so
Hmm.
even they didn't play out the 5 overs. The logic says that they must be declared winners. What could be other factors that
It,
could
it could have
change?
even started as a 5 over game. I mean, they know that the rain threat was big enough that it could come again. So they actually, if you look at it, they played 12 overs. If they had started it as a 5 match 5 over game, we would have got a result.
That's a good point. I didn't think of it that way. That's where I think common sense should prevail when the decision makers are there, when such events takes place. This would have been a very smart decision, overall for everyone, right? So
Hmm.
for the
Hmm.
players, for the organizers, for the spectators, for fantasy players, it would have been a win-win for everybody. I hope
Cricket,
somebody. Go ahead.
cricket in some aspects has been hell bent on screwing itself over. So I think they'll have to look at it.
Yeah, they need to have smart administrators. Maybe they should be watching your show. So I just want to talk a little bit more about yesterday's game. So let me bring up my team
Sure.
just for 1 second.
Yeah.
So just bringing it up in the stream. Here's my team. So the differential Lungi Ningidi, right? Last minute, you asking to make the change. As soon as the
Mm,
11 was announced, made a
mm.
big difference because he picked up 2 wickets straight away.
Yeah, he did. And even Wayne Parnell was a difference maker in most of our leagues, I guess.
Yeah, and also you also made a right call about Raza. Even
Yeah,
though
yeah.
we had to have him in the team for his
Mm,
all-round potential,
mm.
but his ability was forecasted by you would most likely will come short
Yeah.
against the South African attack.
I was surprised to see him being captained by so many. I mean, even though he's in form and everything, but you'll have to consider the fact that this is Australia. This is completely different conditions than the one he has played a lot of his cricket in. And the opposition is South Africa, a team with so many high quality pace bowlers. And then it's also a fast paced game as well. So his chances of failing are extremely high. So even in these situations, you'll come across a lot of these situations when you play fantasy. I think it's always advisable to captain or to vice captain players from the stronger team of the two.
And that's what you did with QDK. And what a great captain pick he was.
Yeah,
As a wicket keeper, he took 2 catches or even 3 catches,
yeah.
and he played a blistering knock.
You mean I think you know that I slept throughout the duration of the match, and I was waking up around the third over mark and to see that it's like what's happening.
Yeah, that's all. All of us thought the match is going to be washed out. It
Hmm.
was a quite surprise. In fact, I started following the game only after the sixth
Yeah.
over,
Hmm.
and I was already happy to see the Nangini has picked up 2 wickets.
Yeah.
And one is to say he'll pick up wickets when he bowls 4 overs, but he
Hmm.
picked up those wickets when he just bowled 2 overs. So that was
Yeah. Hmm.
a great surprise for me.
Yeah.
So with that, let's jump into today's game. We have an exciting game coming up today
Yeah. We do.
between Australia and Sri Lanka. Again,
Hmm.
at my favorite ground at the Laka.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's Optus now. They've changed it.
we have
It's
changed it now. It's the
yeah.
Optus
They moved.
Stadium. They
Yeah.
also moved the venue, Sal. I was not following it much. If
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can.
It Optus has been hosting majority of Perth's game for the last 5 years. Perth, I think it's under reconstructions, and it's also Perth. Optus is one of the most attractive cricket stadiums in the world now. It's so big. It's a lot of investment gone into it. It's also a better venue. It seems better positioned, I guess it seems, and it's also has better facilities than Waka. So like you'll only see domestic matches being played at Waka these days. Even BBL matches have been moved over to Optus, and international matches are being hosted there. It's a wonderful venue and one of my favorite venues as well. I mean, it just carried over a lot of Waka's characteristics. If you look at it, I mean, it still has the pace and bounce. It may not be as difficult for batters to score as it was at Waka. For example, at Waka, the scoring was difficult throughout the entire 20 overs. At Optus, it's only the first six or the first 8 overs. But once you get through it, and if you're a good back player, that's it. You could score plunder. You could plunder runs there.
Yeah, that's what your Perth venue guide shows, right? So again, we want to remind our viewers about the straight boundaries being short, the square boundaries being long,
Hmm.
and the pitch aiding pace and bounce. It
Yeah.
will be very difficult for batsmen to score a square of the boundaries unless they have a strong back foot play.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the key point. Like, you can score runs if you're good on back foot, but if you're no good, that's going to get you.
Yeah, and also as the venue, it favors the team batting first to over 60% of win percentage.
Yes.
So obviously, the team that wins the toss would be choosing to bat first.
Yeah.
And let's look at both the scenarios. You've given a scenario for fantasy
Hmm.
builder for Australia bowls first, or vis-a-vis when Australia bats first,
Yeah.
and you will make your final 11 recommendation after the toss is done.
Yeah.
But before we go into whether Australia is going to bowl first or bat first, let's
Hmm.
look at the fantasy cheat sheet for both the Australian and Sri Lankan teams.
Yeah.
Let me just bring that up on my screen. Just give me a second. I'm just bringing up the team Australia's team cheat sheet. Hopefully, it comes up on your stream now.
It is. Yeah.
All right. So obviously, you have Mitch Marsh and Tim David, who are very strong back foot, players.
Yeah.
And what are the chances that the Sri Lankan bowling unit will get through to have Tim David play enough balls today for Australia bats first?
I think the key is going to be Lahiru Kumara and Binura Fernando. The 2 overs that Binura Fernando balls up front, they'll have to get at least one of Warner and Finch out within that, because if they don't, it's going to be nearly game over for Sri Lanka. And after that, once if they get through a wicket or two on the first 3 overs, then Lahiru Kumara can come in and he could take down he could attack the middle order. Maxwell has had weaknesses against Austell, short stuff, and then Mitchell Marsh. Mitchell Marsh is their best bet. I mean, if there's someone who can turn the pressure on Lahiru Kumara, it's going to be Mitchell Marsh. He's also the home boy. But if you go Tim David, I don't fancy him a lot on the back foot, because I think his strength lies in smashing full length and slow balls, and also spin even. I think when you get the line right with the short balls, it's one of the big problems for Tim David generally. So is
So,
it
given the
yeah.
problems David Warner has with Stuart Broad in
Hmm. Hmm.
bouncy, pacey conditions,
Hmm.
what are the chances of David Warner coming good on these pitch conditions against these bowlers you just mentioned?
David Warner only has to get through Binura Fernando. Left arm pace has been his biggest weakness of late. Left arm new ball pace. So it's like the first 3 overs. If he gets through, then there is no one who's stopping him. But if he doesn't, then there is a problem in the first 3 overs that's there.
Yeah, very interestingly, Harsha Bogle had tweeted, he doesn't understand the fantasy Maxwell has to become a left-hand batsman.
Hmm.
It kind of attempts that shot, way too often was his point. But
Hmm.
against Hasaranga and Tikshana,
Hmm.
on a Perth condition, do
Yeah.
you think that if the David Warner kind of gets out around the seventh, eighth over mark, kind of
Hmm.
sets the stage for somebody like Maxwell to come in around the ninth, 10th over, when the
Yeah.
spinners are operating, that Maxwell could bat himself back into form in Perth?
I think Maxwell is closer to finding his form. His match against India and even in the last game against New Zealand. I mean, those are shots that peak Maxwell, prime Maxwell plays. So if they are coming back, and he has also generated a decent strike rate in the last two games, and Sri Lanka are one of his favorite teams. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is the game that he actually shows he has got form, and I think he's found it. But this is the match that we'll see. It will see a confirmation of it happening.
Yeah. So with Mitchell Stark's bowling form
Mm,
has not been
mm,
too great off late,
mm,
and
mm.
Pat Cummins is not a great limited overs bowler.
Isn't, yeah.
Australia does not have one of the strongest bowling attacks. Given Zampa is not one of the top five wrist spinners out there.
I think Zampa is still is. I think he will be the second or even third best wrist spinner. I mean, if you consider that there is a bit of like Adil Rashid, Adam Zampa, they're all pretty much at the same level. If you have Rashid Khan at first and maybe even Yuzvendra Chahal at second, they will Zampa will still break through the top five. In general, though, yes, I think we even pointed out in our season preview this thing that Australia might have big names in their bowling unit, but they're not one of the strongest bowling attacks. I mean, it's simple. If Zampa is your most T20 style bowler, Zampa is still a traditional leg spinner. It's not like a really unorthodox bowler. But if Zampa is your most T20 style bowler, then there is a problem in your lineup. Mitchell Stark hasn't progressed at all. I mean, once he stopped playing IPL, and then he's prioritized Test cricket and ODIs and Australia in general, he hasn't progressed. So that's one problem. And Pat Cummins, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, his numbers show that, his IPL numbers show that, his T20I numbers show that he's not one of those typical T20 bowlers. He has a very monotonous way of bowling in T20s. So that's a problem. And then Josh Hazelwood, it's still Josh Hazelwood. I mean, if you look at the split in our tournament preview, he's a bowler who is finding it easier to get wickets against the weaker teams and even the mediocre teams, but against the very best players of back foot bowling, which you can find a lot of generally in India, South Africa, and England, he has struggled. His economy rate is higher. His wicket, he doesn't take as many wickets. So when you're good on the back foot, you can handle Josh Hazelwood outside of power play. But if you aren't, which teams like Sri Lanka and even New Zealand, a lot of the times, the last match might maybe an exception, but New Zealand are generally struggle against that type of bowling. So New Zealand, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, these are the teams that struggle a lot against Hazelwood, which makes them a good fantasy option today, actually.
Interesting. And Australia, goes with a deep, batting with up to
Hmm.
Wade at number seven and goes only with
Hmm.
four bowlers, and
Hmm.
uses Mitch Marsh, Maxwell, and Stoinis very sparingly. Just look at their overs bowled per match.
Exactly. Yeah.
Except for Maxwell, who's around
Hmm.
1.5,
Hmm.
Mitch Marsh is actually less than one.
Yeah, because Mitch Marsh is not fit enough half the time he plays. So I mean, he isn't even fit today, I guess, to bowl. That is, he's likely to start as a batsman only, at least for the next game or two. But once they get into the knockouts, that is, if at all they do, then Mitch Marsh will start bowling.
Yeah, I guess like Hardik Pandya, unless your fifth bowling option who's an all-rounder is fit enough to bowl all the four overs,
Mm,
I don't think to compete at the highest level, such
mm,
11 would start as favorites if they went against one of the stronger teams.
yeah,
So great. So thanks for breaking down the fantasy cheat sheet for Australia. Let me bring up the Sri Lanka sheet in just
sure.
a minute.
Mm,
It's just coming up in 1 second. Let me know if you're able to see it.
yeah, this is quickly becoming my favorite section. I mean, it puts a lot of things into perspective.
Exactly. That's what I thought. This is the only sheet one needs to bring up, and I could ask you all the questions for that. I don't
But
have answers for.
even when I populate this sheet, I mean that brings me a lot of joy when I do this to see the numbers. Sometimes they hit you hard. Sometimes you'll be surprised, and sometimes like, yeah, this is what I expected. So it's good to have this.
Yeah. So looking at the sheet,
Mm,
Rajapaksa becomes an automatic choice. That maybe it will be a popular choice. If not, he's
yeah.
not an automatic choice in our 11, given
Mm,
his runs per match and a strike rate.
Yeah, Rajapaksa, I think he started as one of the most popular options, even though we highlighted in our tournament preview that he shouldn't be. Because one, he's playing lower down the order. Two, he takes a lot of risks to be successful, and he hasn't ever played in Australia before. I mean, he might have played a game or two, but it's Australia. These conditions are not familiar to him. He hasn't played a lot in South Africa. These are the types of conditions he should play to be familiar with what you are going to get in this World Cup. But Rajapaksa hasn't played, and that's evident in his numbers. He scored a total of 40 runs at strike rate of 105. I guess the bigger grounds are the bigger boundaries are becoming a problem for him. The bounce and pace on decks are becoming a problem for him. I mean that's one thing that we predicted it right as well.
Yeah, I think the other challenge is that if your top five batsmen, if they're not playing
Mm,
domestic T20 cricket, they're
mm,
not playing your, Sampas and Cummins much. They're
yeah,
not only short on the experience playing in
mm,
Australia, they're also
mm,
short on experience playing Australian bowlers.
yeah,
How is
yeah.
that going to kind of bring Stark Cummins into play today as fantasy options?
It's a good question, actually. I think that's where our biggest value today lies. I was shocked to see Mitchell Stark being owned by only 55% of managers. I mean, he may not be at his best. He may not have progress. But look at the opposition. It's still Sri Lanka, and look at the venue. It's Optus. So I think if it's as good as an opportunity that he can get you to give you a couple of wickets, which could be a big game changer in a daily fantasy scenario. I think that's also the same with Cummins. Cummins is again another bowler whom you do not usually fantasy. Your Cummins is another bowler that you do not usually fancy in T20s, but against Sri Lanka at top test, he becomes a factor. And even Australia are using Stark in a bizarre fashion. It's like 1 and 2 and 1. So this what it makes is it forces them to bowl at least two of Hazelwood and Cummins up front and Cummins with the new ball against the Sri Lankan batting unit. I think that's an opportunity that we can tap into, especially if Australia bowl first.
Yeah, the hard Perth wickets with the Sri Lankan top order not having any experience, not just playing in Australia, not just playing Australian bowlers, but playing in
Mm,
Perth. That's
mm.
a whole different dimension altogether. So
It is,
that
yeah.
could bring in somebody like an Hazaranga into play, because he
Mm,
can bat a bit and he has played
true.
against these bowlers.
Yeah. Hazaranga, his bowling may not suit the venue, but there's always this danger with leaving him out because he could get you a couple of cheap wickets towards the end when they're accelerating, and if Sri Lanka are bowling first, that's one thing. And the second thing is always yes, he can bat, so that's something he could score 15 to 20 runs. That could make a lot of difference in terms of daily fantasy. So even though the wicket doesn't suit spinners, I don't think I'll be going into this game without one into Hazaranga.
That's a good point. Talk to us a little bit about this talent Pramod Madhushan. He's bowled only 6 overs so far, but his bowling strike rate looks good. So if he's
Hmm.
fit today, would he play, and whom does he replace?
I think he'll play. I think Sri Lanka surprisingly started him over Lahiru Kumara when they started the qualifiers, so which was surprising for me because I thought they would go in with Lahiru Kumara once they found out that the left armer wasn't fit. So that's one thing that surprised me. I think so. If he's fit again, I think he's likely to replace one of Lahiru Kumara or Binura Fernando, and he has some skills. I mean, he moves a new ball, but he's not a lot of he's not a really quick bowler. He's someone who can move the new ball, but I think it's too big a risk to bring him in to waste a slot on him at the moment because we do not know how well he has come back, whether he's really fit or also that it's not an option I fancy from a fantasy point of view.
But from a talent point of view, he's definitely somebody worth watching out.
I think there's a bit to look forward to because when I saw him initially, I didn't make much of him, but in the qualifiers, I think his ability to move the new ball really took me by surprise.
Interesting. So since we have now discussed the both the Sri Lanka and Australia cheat sheets, why
Hmm.
don't we look at your fantasy builders? If Australia bowls first, and
Sure.
if Australia bats first, second.
Hmm.
So let me bring up that screen in a second. So this is what everybody's been waiting to see. The fantasy builder. I don't think it has come out at your end as yet. So yeah, just coming out in a second.
Sure. Yeah.
So, so you said if Australia bats first,
Hmm.
have Stoinis and Zampa. Talk to us
Hmm.
a bit more about that.
Yeah, because I'm going with I'll come from bowling first because that puts into perspective why I'm doing what I'm doing. When
So then
Australia
let me ask
bowls,
you the question around the bowling first. So you
uh,
had picked up, I made a note of it. Just give me a second.
hmm,
Cummins
hmm,
and Finch are in if when
hmm,
Australia bowls first.
hmm.
Is it because you expect Finch to settle in and play himself to a safe 50?
It
And
is. It is one of the reasons, and the other is that Stoinis is someone who bats at five. Sri Lanka are likely to score 150 to 140 to 150. That's not the score that you'll expect a number five to add to when Australia are batting second. I mean, that's the target that you normally expect the top four, especially when they're as good as Australia's, to chase down. So Stoinis batting takes a hit if Australia bats second. But at the same time, if they bat first, even though Stoinis bats at five, all he needs is 15 to 20 balls at the end, or even 10 to 15 balls to make a difference. So that if he could get 30 to 30 runs in that, and then a wicket and then a wicket when they bowl again, so it's like it's going to be one of your biggest differentials. But it is a risk I can take when Australia are bowling first because I don't expect Stoinis to get a lot of game time, even 10 balls that he could get while batting first. That's not something I expect when Australia ball first to happen. So I can gamble against his bowling, but I cannot gamble against his all round value.
sense. And also Cummins comes in as an option if Australia
Mm.
bowls first. And we just
Yeah.
discussed about how Cummins could come into play against the Sri Lankan batters.
Mm.
And also he feels in the deep, right? He might
Mm.
pick up those catches of Zampa
Mm.
when Sri Lankan batsmen are trying to accelerate in the later overs.
Mm. I like the yeah I like the pitch, which is why I have Cummins, even though I do not rate him as a T20 bowler. So that's one thing. And the why have him replaced by Zampa when Australia bat first? Is that suppose if Australia bat first and they score 190 and 200, it doesn't matter whether the pitch supports spin or it doesn't. Zampa will be bowling throughout the heart of the innings, and Sri Lankan batsmen are going to try and hit him for sixes and get hold out in the deep. So that's not a risk we should be taking, leaving Zampa out when Australia are batting first.
Yeah, and also talk to us a little bit about the differentials. You picked up Fernando and
Yeah.
Sanka as
Hmm.
a couple of differentials where we,
Hmm.
where the ownership is going to be at just 14 and 33%.
Yeah, Vinod Fernando, I think it's not as big as the differentials that we have had in the last two games, but I think it's still a differential because it's one of the Sri Lankan picks that could change the game. He picked up two wickets. I think it was 4, 1, 12, and 2. I guess he considered only 12 runs for two wickets in one of the games played in Australia. It's exactly the new ball. It's new ball skill that caused the problem. Perth is one of the decks that could repeat the scenario again. So that's one reason I have him. If Binura Fernando doesn't play, we'll be replacing him with Lahiru Kumara. But one of those two will definitely be in the 11. And then the other thing is that Nisanka is coming back. He's coming back from injury, and normally when a player comes back from injury, unless he's someone like Virat Kohli or Rohit Sharma, his ownership percentage will be low. We saw it with someone in the last game, I guess,
Ngidi.
Ngidi, yeah,
Yeah.
Ngidi. Even though he's a big name, but because he wasn't expected in to be in the 11, his ownership percentage was low. Now, if you look at him in the next match, it will be at 80, 80, 85. So that's the thing. Same thing with Nisanka. Nisanka is not one of the biggest superstars in the game, but he's a useful pick. He's someone who helps, particularly from a fantasy point of view. He may not help Sri Lanka with the way he plays. It's like, again, Kane Williamson, someone, again, another pick we discussed the same way. These are not the picks that may help the team necessarily, but they do help fantasy managers by scoring a nice 40 ball 50, which is everything you need in most scoring systems that there are these days.
I think the ownership being less for players coming back from injury is
Mm,
exactly the recent
mm.
bias that we spoke about during our first
It
show.
is. It is one of the prime examples of recency bias. True.
Great. So I think we are done with the pre-match show. We
Mm,
went through the cheat sheets. We went through the venue guide.
mm,
We went through the fantasy builder when
mm,
Australia backs or bowls first. You can catch all these action on fantasy.cricketapa.com.
mm,
If you are a fantasy cricket app or if you are a sports publisher and you're looking to remove guesswork from your fans fantasy cricket playing so fans playing fantasy cricket, you should really look at subscribing to Al's fantasy predictions from Roanuz. So you just visit fantasy.cricketapa.com to get all the information you need. Or you can just email me at kount, KOUNT, at roanuz.com. That's ROANUZ.com. So, Al, great. So, we will see you again once the toss is done so that you
Yeah,
can help us pick the final 11. I'm
yeah,
really looking forward and excited to do that.
sure.
The rivalry between Sri Lanka and Australia, has its own folklore,
It does.
and it's a contest within the contest to play fantasy, and really looking forward to it.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, see
Thank
you
you.
around. See you soon, Al. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.